The film revolves around a couple on a boat in the open sea, and after drinking too much alcohol, the effect of the alcohol causes them to get lost. After some time, they notice a large island in the distance and decide to go down to try to get help, not knowing what awaits them. The woman decides to go ahead to try to find someone, while her boyfriend stays at the dock tying the boat. While walking through the forest, she finds a very suspicious facility surrounded by fences and barbed wire. Thinking that it is some kind of military facility, the girl begins to call for help, but when she does not receive a response, she decides to return to the forest and perhaps find shelter in the forest. In the midst of her search, the woman begins to hear strange sounds coming from the surrounding trees, and fearing that a fierce predator will catch her, she starts running in extreme terror. Feeling trapped, the young woman begins to call out to her boyfriend, who, unfortunately for her, is too far away to hear. Realizing that her partner will not be able to save her, the girl tries to escape again but is easily caught by mysterious creatures that drag her by her legs to their lair. Along the way, the woman tries to grab onto something and maybe escape, but the monster devours her fingers and, unable to resist, she simply gives up. In the distance, her boyfriend finally hears his partner's painful screams, but unfortunately, it is too late and there is nothing he can do to help her. Unaware of the dangers that await them, Matt and John, the two brothers who have the best relationship, fly in their plane to the same island, accompanied by their childhood friends Noah and Sarah, as well as Nikki, Matt's girlfriend. It turns out that before it became deserted, there were some residents, among them the brother's uncle. After many years without visiting the place, the group decides to spend a weekend in the abandoned house to enjoy it away from civilization. When they arrive, the two brothers go to the garage where the generator is located and take the opportunity to see if their uncle's old car is still running, and are surprised to discover that after many years of inactivity, the car is still running, even needing some repairs. Inside the house, Sarah and Noah are responsible for stocking up on supplies and preparing a special drink to celebrate the arrival. But since there is no electricity in the house, they have to wait for the brothers to turn on the generator before they can use the blender. Once Matt and John are done with the task, an excited Sarah turns on the blender, but she doesn't even have time to celebrate. A few seconds after they manage to turn on the device, the power suddenly goes out. Not knowing what happened, the two friends decide to check the fuses in the basement, which due to the lack of electricity, has become completely dark. Noah then uses his lighter to light up the environment, and while they explore the place, they find a wine cellar with dozens of bottles of wine and decide to take them. After some more time exploring the place, the two friends manage to reach the fuse box, find the burned fuse, and start replacing it with a new one. After the power is reconnected, Sarah makes her drink and everyone starts getting drunk. After some swimming, the group goes to the porch of the house where they watch John practice shooting with his bow until a cute German Shepherd puppy comes out of the woods, making the friends fall in love with a lot of sweetness. In the middle of the night, when the drink they brought for the trip runs out, Noah goes to the kitchen to get one of the bottles of wine he found in the basement, and when he opens the door, the puppy goes with him. As the man opens the bottle, the previously cute puppy seems angry and starts growling at the man. When Noah returns to the living room and starts telling his friends what happened, the puppy runs out of the house through a hole in the building and heads into the woods. Because Sarah really loves the little animal, she decides to go out and look for it with John, who offers to help her. Using some flashlights, the two friends manage to find the puppy in the middle of the woods, but as they get closer, a full-grown dog jumps out of a bush on Sarah, knocking her to the ground. When John comes to help his friend, the angry animal bites the woman's leg for no apparent reason and then runs into the woods with his puppy. Considering the possibility that the animal was infected with rabies, Matt and Nikki argue that they should return to the city the next day to begin treatment and prevent Sarah from getting sick. John says that medical care does not need to be immediate, so they can return after the weekend, but he leaves the decision in Sarah's hands, who believes that the attack was to protect the puppy and does not want to interrupt her friend's short vacation. She chooses to stay home until Monday. In the early morning hours, John wakes up to get a glass of water and finds Sarah visibly upset by the window. When he tries to talk to her, she does not respond and begins to approach him without saying a word, but as soon as she gets close to the man, she begins to kiss him so hard that it hurts him. With John complaining of pain, some triggers are activated in the girl's mind, and she finally regains consciousness, asking him to leave. The next morning, the group of friends are eating breakfast, and we can see that Sarah has a strangely voracious hunger, and she almost pierces Noah's hand with her fork when he tries to grab the last pancake. Once they're done with their meal, John goes shooting in the woods, and since they're bored, the other men decide to go with him while Nikki stays behind to accompany Sarah. In the middle of the woods, the men find no signs of other animals, and with nothing else to do, Noah breaks away from the group and sits on a tree trunk to clean his camera. While cleaning the lens, the man starts hearing growling sounds around him. Worried, he starts looking for the source of the noise and finds himself surrounded on all sides by several dogs. Trying to escape alive, the man runs through the woods until he stumbles upon a root and is found by his friends. As Noah tells them about the dogs, the friend of the woman the dogs had previously eaten appears behind them, completely covered in blood, and says that the dogs don't want anyone on the island. But the man doesn't even have time to explain why. As he speaks, a massive dog jumps on his chest, knocking him off the hill and eating him alive along with his group. The terrified trio ran towards the house, and as they got closer, they saw the girls who were in the water being chased by the animals as well. They ran to try to help them, and just as they were about to enter, one of the dogs managed to bite Nikki's leg and grabbed her by her pants. In an attempt to save her, John grabs his arrow and shoots it at the ferocious dog, but his shot ends up hitting the young woman in the leg, causing her severe pain, but he still manages to scare the creatures away. Once inside the house, Matt breaks the projectile with pliers and begins removing it to make a bandage. While preparing the bandages, the man tries to understand what is happening and tells his friends why this place is now a desert. Many years ago, a company rented part of the island to build a kennel to train some dogs to be guide dogs for the blind. But a few years later, one of the dogs contracted the rabies virus, and since they all frequented the same environment, the sick animal infected other dogs that managed to escape from the training center. With dozens of dogs infected all over the island, the kennel was closed and the island was completely evacuated, becoming the desert it is today. But since the contamination occurred at least a year ago, the dogs must have already died. What Matt wonders now is how they are still alive after being infected for so long. After the inconclusive conversation, Noah, completely hysterical, starts screaming that they should call for medical help for the two injured girls. But the man's screams end up attracting one of the dogs, who jumps through the window and drops him to the ground. As soon as he gets up, the animal lunges at Sarah, and just as he is about to reach her, John stops him at the last moment. Seeing that without his help, his brother could get hurt too, Matt grabs a metal bar and shoves the piece of metal into the animal, who dies shortly after. Realizing that the house is not safe, the group gathers their belongings, and just as they are about to leave the house, they notice two rabid dogs on the pier, right where the plane they used to reach the island is. Matt then says that it is better to wait for the animals to leave, but a few seconds later, Noah looks out the window and sees the plane drifting with the tide because the dogs have cut the rope that was holding the plane. Seeing no sign of the dogs and knowing that they might lose the plane in the middle of the ocean if they take too long to reach it, the group of friends head to the pier, very worried. John jumped into the water to swim to the plane, but as he got closer, the tide turned the plane over, and the man could see that the two dogs who had cut the rope were actually hiding on the wing. The animals then jumped into the water and started swimming towards John, who desperately needed to get back to the dock to avoid getting trapped. Once they were all on solid ground, one of the ferocious dogs tried to attack them, but Noah managed to fend it off with his baseball bat. Taking advantage of the moment, they returned home, barely escaping the other animals. Realizing the capabilities of the angry dogs, the group began reinforcing the windows and cracks in the house with wooden boards. Once the improvements were complete, Noah tried to call the emergency services, but the mobile phones had no signal. Matt and John wrapped the body of the dog that tried to attack Sarah in a cloth and throw it outside. Although things seem safe, they decide that their best chance for survival is to head to the other side of the island, where there is a boat. The strange man who was attacked on the hill must have gotten there somehow, and they assume that the car he used is right at the dock next to the old cabin. Furthermore, Matt argues that even if there is no way out, they might find some communications equipment in the facilities. With the plan in place, the men decide to head to the garage to try to get the old car started again. But when they get outside, the vicious dogs rush at the body the brothers have thrown out and start eating it. Seeing the pack of dogs outside, the trio returns inside and decides to come up with another plan. Matt plans to get to the garage via a rope connecting the two buildings, but for that, he needs the pulley that was on the rope hanging outside. The man then takes advantage of the monsters being distracted by their meal and runs to grab the item. Even as he tries to stay as stealthy as possible, one of the dogs spots him, but he manages to get back inside safely. Next, we see Matt attaching the pulley to the rope connected to the garage. Despite Nikki's injury, she convinces her friend that since she is lighter, she should check out the car. With everything ready, the girl begins to slide down the rope and makes it to the other side. But the ravenous dogs see her hanging like a piece of meat in a butcher shop and run towards her, while her friends try to distract the dogs. Once she is able to enter the garage, Nikki gets into the car and tries to start it, but the car shows no signs of life. Meanwhile, the dogs outside try to get in and manage to punch a hole in the gate big enough to get in. Nikki then climbs through the sunroof and has to cling to the wooden structures of the garage to avoid being eaten. Outside, the group pulls her back, and as the vicious dogs jump to reach her, John shoots an arrow into one of their hearts, finally saving Nikki. During the night, the power suddenly goes out, and Noah, believing it is due to the fuses working again, volunteers to go downstairs to reconnect the electricity. Once downstairs, he starts hearing strange noises coming from a room where a creepy doll is hanging at the entrance. As Noah approaches the source of the sound, one of the dogs jumps on his neck, ripping pieces of his throat, brutally crushing his windpipe and tearing out his jugular vein. Hearing all the commotion, Matt and John rush to the basement entrance but find their friend already dead. They then close the door on the dogs, but it doesn't help, as several dogs outside have gone on a rampage and started breaking the wooden reinforcements on the windows, thus managing to get into the house. The group then decides to run to the attic, but as they get close to there, one of the demon dogs grabs Matt, jumps on his back, and starts biting him, but John saves him, managing to restrain the animal. With everyone upstairs, the dogs have taken over the entire house, and with the only supplies they have left in the attic, they need to come up with a plan to get out as quickly as possible. When dawn comes, the group leaves the attic to check if the monsters are still in the house, but apparently they've all left. So the brothers head to the garage, and while John is behind the wheel, Matt pushes the car until it finally starts moving, but with all the noise, the dogs manage to track them down and start chasing them. The younger brother then jumps on the roof of the car and grabs the bow to try and hit them, but when one of the animals climbs onto the hood, John has to make a sharp turn, and with little support, Matt ends up dropping the bow. With no way to fight off the creatures, the man gets in through the sunroof, but at that very moment, the car stops on its own. Without needing to get out to push, John heads toward a cliff to gain speed and try to restart it. Although it's a rather stupid idea, it eventually works, and they barely escape with their lives. With the car finally starting, the brothers head home. But along the way, a bloodthirsty German shepherd jumps through the car window and nearly bites Matt. John saves him, swerving the car to the side, causing the mutant creature to crash into a pole. At home, Sarah has given up on trying to survive and refuses to flee with them. In an attempt to convince her to change her mind, John approaches her, but at that moment, one of the dogs appears in the room. Determined to avenge the infection, the girl asks him to escape out the window while she stays to fight the monster. Despite his reluctance, John ends up jumping out. At that moment, the dog jumps on Sarah's neck, but she manages to defend herself by putting her arm out in front of her. Knowing that she is unarmed, she will not be able to get the vicious dog out. The girl tries to throw it out the window but ends up falling with it onto a wooden stake, causing them both to die. Realizing that they cannot help their friend, who is already lifeless, the trio gets into a car and begins driving to the other side of the island as other hungry dogs appear, devouring the punctured corpses. When they reach the other side, the group decides to enter the facility to try to call for help over the radio, but as they explore, they discover that it is not a guide dog training house but a laboratory that has been genetically modifying animals into fighting machines. It turns out that the ferocious dogs never had rabies, they were just modified to the point where they became uncontrollable. The researchers realized that they had gone too far and decided to kill the animals, but since they had become so intelligent and strong, the mutated dogs managed to escape the facility. Realizing the danger they would be in if they decided to stay, the group of scientists simply abandoned the island and left the dogs there. This explains why they are so intelligent, and also why there are no other animals on the island. They were all wiped out by the beasts. Regardless, once they reach the radio, Nikki sees through the window that the transmission tower cable has been disconnected, and John volunteers to reconnect the wires. He then leaves the building, and as he climbs up, he sees the couple's boat docked. When the man gives the signal, Nikki turns on the speakers to increase the radio's range, but when she presses the button, an electrical short occurs, causing a fire in the building's wiring and giving John a massive shock, causing him to fall from the top of the tower. Fortunately, he survives. However, as the fire spread all over the place, the dogs finally found them and managed to dig under the fence to attack John, who received several bites. Seeing that his brother needs help, Matt grabs his baseball bat and runs to help him fight off the animals. Inside, Nikki opens the valve of the gas cylinder and lets the dogs in. Sensing that there is enough liquid in the air to cause an explosion, she opens the door, allowing the gas to reach the flames, causing a fire that kills all the dogs inside. Outside, Matt and John are surrounded on all sides, and just when they think they have no chance of survival, Nikki shows up in her car and runs over the dogs. She survives the explosion by hiding right behind the door. With everyone in the car and knowing the location of the boat, the trio drives to the scene and pushes the car into the water as the vicious dogs approach. The group manages to get out of the sinking car and safely reach the dock. After getting on the boat, they escape the island, seeing the animals watching them from afar. The film ends when they are in the sea, where they are unfortunately surprised to find a vicious dog there with them.